welcome back to Regenesis Sanctuary, where I build for endangered animals in Planet Zoo while I tell you something about the real-life animal. Last time we finished off our research center, and with that the entrance area and the Asian temperate area are finished. So I thought it would be nice to have a quick little tour around the zoo so far. So far we have built for the African penguin, the Komodo dragon, the red panda, the giant panda, the Bengal tiger and the gharial, which are quite a bunch of animals already. But we are not nearly finished with the zoo yet. Today we are gonna start building on the Asian jungle area. Starting in this corner behind the Bengal temple, we are gonna be adding a habitat for the Malayan tapir. Before I start building, I've mapped out an area which is necessary for the tapir habitat, and the habitat that we're gonna be working on next time. Then I'm adding some pathing and I'm raising the terrain within the habitat to be level with the rest of the hill on which the Bengal temple is sitting. To make the habitat more accessible for the staff, I'll be making a staff path to the back of the habitat leading to a staff building, which will also be the indoor enclosure for the tapir and the other animals in this area. The Malayan tapir is an animal native to Malaysia and Indonesia. And unfortunately it has had the IUCN status of endangered since 2008, and the numbers of Malayan tapirs in the wild are still decreasing. Tapirs need a lot of forest to live in, and one of their main threats is deforestation, as well as being hunted. To try to counteract these threats, there are several protected areas that are being kept intact for the tapir to live in. In zoos, tapirs can live outside fairly well, but they do need an indoor enclosure as well. So this part of the building will be their indoor enclosure, and I've put in a PVC strip door so that it's sort of closed off, but they can enter at will. Then I start creating their water. Tapirs love water and they swim a lot. Actually, most of the time they don't really swim, they just walk into the water and submerge themselves fully walking along the bottom. For this habitat I want to create just a natural jungle look. So I want to cover this building up with rock work. I'm using the rock cladding to just make an even rock surface for starters, and then I'm adding some more rocks for some more depth. Later on I'll be also adding some planting and stuff to make it look a little better. But I think it's a pretty good start already. Then I'm moving on to some of the rock work along the habitat, including this wall on the back end of the habitat that is open now. Creating this rock wall makes sure that the tapirs can't escape. Next I added some enrichment and then moved on to the inside of the indoor habitat. Tapirs are actually known to have pretty sensitive feet that are easily hurt, so it's recommended to have kind of a soft flooring. For example, rubber. Now there's not really any sort of rubber flooring in the game, so I've decided to use the 3D printed flooring because it sort of maybe looks a little bit rubberish. Then I'm creating some metal fence work to keep the tapirs separate when necessary, but I'll be leaving these fences open so they can just enter whenever they want. When looking up how tapirs are being kept, I read that they need walls of about 2 meters height, which makes sense because they are fairly tall themselves. But what I thought was funny is that it's not recommended to use horizontal metal poles because they can start climbing on them, and I was not exactly expecting that. But for that reason we're only using vertical beams. I'm also adding some bedding to this area and some fake feeding troughs. This entire indoor area is nothing really special, but it's also not accessible to the public, so I think keeping it simple makes more sense. And then it's on to a lot more rock work. Over here where the water ends, I want to create a waterfall going down into the habitat that we'll be building next time. So I'm using one of these waterfall pieces as a base and recoloring it to match the jungle rocks more. Then I'm covering it up mostly in rock so that it looks a little bit more natural. It's not a perfect fit with the water, but it's the best you can do in Planet Zoo, at least as far as I know. There's still quite some gaps in between the pathing and the terrain, And because of the way the pathing and the terrain works in Planet Zoo, you can't really close that up very nicely. So I've decided to use the mulch pieces to close up these gaps. I'll be filling them with plants later on. To line them on this side, I'm using some more of the rocks, but I'm using jungle rocks for this habitat, and I've been using taiga rocks for the tiger habitat next to it. So I've created a little bit of a blend by mixing some of the jungle rocks into the taiga rocks and the other way around, just so it blends in a little bit more. Even more rock work. Time to start on the viewing areas. First of all, from the Bengal tiger, there's this little corner that's actually perfect for getting a view of the tapirs. So I've added a little bit of fencing and then some mesh to keep a little bit more distance between the visitors and the tapirs. Tapirs are actually known to be quite unpredictable sometimes, so they can actually be quite dangerous. So a little bit of distance between the visitors and the tapirs is recommended. The rest of this area was a little bit tricky at first. I wasn't quite sure how to do this, but I ended up extending the water until it was underneath the path. For that I needed to raise the path a little bit, but because the path now aligns to the water, it creates a barrier for the tapirs so that they cannot escape, and the visitors are still relatively close to the animals. For the leftover piece of path, I decided to create an arch out of rock and put some one-way glass in it so the visitors could take a look at the tapirs from here as well. Finally, I added some fences along the paths along the water so the visitors wouldn't fall in. Then I decided to finish off the roof of this building. I've kept it quite simple and low because I don't really want you to be able to see this from the path that the visitors walk on. Back in the habitat, I decided to layer some more soil onto the grass. I had already done this here and there, but just to finish it off, I've mostly just layered some short grass and the two types of soil on top of each other. And then it was time to move on to the planting. I had a lot of fun working with the plants in this habitat, because tapirs actually enjoy a lot of variety in plants and also just a lot of plants, which is perfect to just play around with. First I added in some smaller trees and some bamboo bushes, before I added a lot of scaviola bushes. Ever since I discovered that it doesn't affect the traversable area, I absolutely love using these. I almost forgot to add a water source and a feeding trough. Even though the tapirs already have plenty of water, it's important for them to have a designated spot for drinking because they are actually known for pooping in the water quite a lot. So it's best if they don't have to also drink that. On this wall I used a bunch of different plants like the strangler fig roots, but also some of the basket ferns and some other random plants. After I got finished with all of these, I thought it already looked a lot better. I also added a bunch of plants to the water so the tapirs could be kind of hidden while swimming, like the water hyacinths and some of the eelgrass. Then I added a bunch more tropical plants all around, some more trees, some of the elephant ears and stuff like that. I really just kept adding more and more plants wherever I saw fit. Once I was basically done, I did think that the building was still a little bit too obvious, so I added 2 large trees in front of it to kind of soften the edges a little bit and make it less obvious. Now that the habitat is mostly done, it's time for some finishing touches. I put some donation boxes and trash cans inside the rocks so they weren't all that visible, and then at the bottom of the stairs I made a nice tapir sign onto a rock. It's quite simple, but at least the people will know what is up there. I also played around with the tapir signs, an education sign and a bunch of rocks to create this education sign. I added some plants around it to fill up the area a little bit and make it all seem very jungly. I'm not sure if jungly is a word, but you know what I mean. Most of the finishing touches were just adding a bunch more plants around the area. And with that, the habitat is finished. You can walk up the stairs here from the tiger habitat, and then you have a lovely view across the entire tapir habitat. They are in the water very often, so you can see them there best. They have been getting along fine with the two of them, and we're already expecting some offspring, so that is great. They also seem to be enjoying their habitat a lot. They're playing with the enrichment, swimming around and running around as well. They're also using the indoor area for some rest. It was a little bit more of a simple habitat this time, but I hope you enjoyed the video nonetheless. Next time we're gonna be adding yet another animal to the Asia jungle area, and I hope you will join me for that. But until then, have a nice day. Bye!